One. Hey, Peter. Good to speak to you. I thought this would be a good opportunity to run through the leadership race, the cabinet. I mean, there's a lots for us to dig into. I want to start with who you went for in the leadership race. Now, I know who you did, but I'm sure our listeners will be interested.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I didn't vote for either of them. I was one of the 600 odd people who sent back a spoilt ballot paper. To kind of just give you a bit of background, I hate Conservative leadership contests. I think they bring out the worst in Conservatives. I think they bring out the worst in the Conservative Party. I think they bring out the worst in politicians. I generally despise them. I think they're awful. And it really annoyed me, actually, that we're having, don't get me wrong, in my opinion, Boris Johnson had to go, but it's annoyed me that we've had to have one, particularly over summer recess, because usually I kind of unplug over summer recess. I usually take a nice 2 months of just kind of pulling away from the kind of furore of politics and all the rest of it. And then they go and decide to have a leadership race. And then they go and have a leadership race with two of the worst candidates I think I've come across in a long time. Now, I'll be very open and honest. The candidate I wanted was Penny Mordaunt. I thought she would have been a brilliant prime minister and a brilliant leader of the Conservatives. Now, I accept that she didn't get through the system and she didn't get through the votes and all the rest of it. And we were left with Liz and Rishi. My problem with those two is, let's just say they're not going to be the life and soul of the party, are they? They're not really the kind of characters that I think we needed. But obviously Liz won in the end, and I think it was somewhat of a foregone conclusion. That's also one of my big criticisms of all of this was as soon as Rishi made it to the final two, whoever Rishi was against was definitely going to win. Yeah. So I don't think we had a proper election. I think we had another coronation, in my opinion. I think it was a lot closer, the vote, than most people were kind of expecting. But for me, it was roughly where I thought it would be. For the record, I also didn't vote for Boris or Jeremy either. So I have a track record of not voting for Conservative leadership candidates. For me, I don't negative vote. So I don't vote for one person because I don't like the other one. I always try to find a positive reason to vote for someone. And neither of those two candidates, in my opinion, did enough to convince me that they were worth voting for. Now, people are entitled to disagree with me, and everybody's got who they support and all the rest of it. But we are where we are, and Liz became leader, and now she's prime minister. And I tell you what, she's got the most unenviable job in the country right now. I can't think of a worse job I would want right now than to be prime minister. The amount that she's got on her plate to deal with, I think, is absolutely incredible. I can't think, and I was talking to a couple of colleagues about this, of another prime minister who's really come in at such a bad time. Maybe John Major after Thatcher, but or maybe Thatcher after Jim Callaghan, maybe one of those two. But I can't, just with the amount that they've got to deal with, and and realistically, what is a very short amount of time to turn it around in, because we're not that far away from a general election, though everybody has to cross themselves when you say general election in Westminster these days, just in case Liz does something stupid and decides to call an early one. But yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy ride, really, these last couple of months. I do think the leadership election went on too long. I think it became a bit of a navel-gazing exercise towards the end. And yeah, like I said, I'm not a big fan of them, and I'm just annoyed that I had to deal with it over summer. But like we said, we are where we are, and obviously I'm a Conservative, and I stand behind my leader and all the rest of it. And I hope she does a brilliant job, and she's got my full-throated support now. But it doesn't mean that I don't have my criticisms of her.
I'm the same as you. I really don't like leadership races at all. Bit different to you. I wanted Boris to actually stay. I wanted.
Oh yeah, really? That surprises me, actually.
No, I really was, and it was one of the main reasons it's up there. It's funny when you said the negative voting. It's up there. The main reason why I was not going to vote Rishi Sunak was I see him as I think Boris was already on he was going to obviously sooner or later have to resign.
Yeah.
But I just felt really anger and bitter towards him being the one to
really. Now this does surprise me. You are full of surprises today, Sunil.
No, it's just, you know what it is. I was a Boris skeptic when Theresa May resigned,
Yeah.
and when it was the leadership race. But in the end, I did go for him. I voted for Boris on two main reasons. I felt he's much more likely to win an election. I vote very that one was very
Yeah.
pragmatic. I just thought he's more likely to win a bigger election and just to get Brexit over and done with.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel Hunt had the capacity to do those two things. So
Yeah.
I went for Boris on that understanding. And I just don't, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the Prime Minister not finishing their term. The reason
Yeah.
being, it's just, like somebody said this to me, I think it's maybe a fair comment, which is Rishi was a bit like the people's populist and Liz is a bit like the Tory populist in terms of
That's not a bad description of those two, actually. I think
But-
one of my criticisms of Liz during the leadership election was the way that she styled herself as the new Margaret Thatcher.
Mm.
I always don't like the idea that old policies for new problems, that kind of thing. Like, we don't need reheated Thatcherism. I think we needed something new.
I would agree with you, but I just think that's my problem with the leadership races, right? Because it's just,
Yeah.
and when you don't finish your terms, I don't see how we're never not going to get a populist in this kind of environment, if you see what I
Yeah.
mean. But, you know, if that's why I wanted Boris to either lose the next election or less majority or whatever we changed, I felt he deserved that opportunity. So I really didn't want him to go. I was very sad that he did. And I was one of the, I feel like maybe I probably was the minority for wanting Boris to stay, but after
So
that,
I think it's an interesting, but I never really thought of it in that way about him staying to give him the chance to finish what he started. I think that's a really fair comment, actually, and I do agree with you. I don't like it when politicians walk out partway through. I know he was kind of a little bit pushed, and he had all the Partygate scandals, and then he had the Chris Pincher scandal and all the rest of it. So, like, there were other mitigating factors, but I do think you're right. I don't like it when they hop, skip, and jump out. I don't think that's right. But yeah, I am. You are right. We were always going to end up with a populist because it's a leadership election. So whoever is the most popular wins.
yeah. And I think she played it well, right? She went for and I think Boris did the same thing when he did it, which was like go for they almost went for I think where maybe Rishi got it wrong. Interesting your take is I think he almost played for the general public, especially at the start, like he was trying to win whereas I felt Liz just was, I need my, she went to win a Tory race, whereas I think Rishi was almost playing a different game, which
I completely agree with you on that. And I think I made this exact same point on one of my appearances on GB News. I think Rishi's problem was he went to run as a prime minister first.
Yeah.
And he kind of forgot that, oh, wait, I've got to talk to dyed-in-the-wool Tory members who like small state tax cuts and things like that. I think his campaign will be probably studied as how not to win a Tory election one day. At least Jeremy Hunt, when on his campaign, even though he lost, I think he ran a very, very good campaign. Rishi, in my opinion, didn't. I think he made far too many mistakes early on. I struggled with him. One of his kind of narrative lines was that somehow everything wasn't his fault. That when it came to the economy, it's really difficult to say I'm going to reset the economy when you were the guy running the economy for the last couple of years. That I think that just wasn't washing with pretty much anyone, and even some of the Rishi supporters I know, even they were saying like he needs to stop saying that. Like that line of also him saying that he was a tax cutting chancellor. He needed to stop saying that as well. I think he just undermined a lot of his kind of integrity. Particularly when it came to at least wavering voters, because there were a lot of people right up to the very end. I will admit who I spoke with who was saying, I still don't know, because I think because neither Liz nor Rishi were very popular with the membership early on. I think they were a lot of average members were like, oh, I don't really know between these two. So in a way, there was a bit of an election fight, but I think a lot of people were kind of just holding their nose and voting for the least worst option. And I think that's just a terrible way to run an election. But one thing I do want to see is how if we ever do get to have a conversation about how we change how we vote for our leader, I think we need
How would
3.
you like to do it? What would be your
So,
ideal way of doing it?
so I think it's fine to let the MPs have a choice, but instead of it being a final 2, it should be a final 3. Because I think you then stop the kind of, oh, I don't like that one, so I'm going to vote for that one. And you stop them, at least to a degree, you stop it becoming a coronation. I mean, if you make it a 3-way fight, I think at least there are 3 different voices. It's not just the 2 of battling off. I get why it's the 2, because it's supposed to be quicker. It's supposed to be, and all the rest of it. I understand that logically, but our politics has changed so much. Our party has changed so much. And it just seems like the way that we do it is a little antiquated. It does need a bit of updating. But the one thing I would like to see is, and I don't know whether people will agree with me on this, but I'd like to see the role of party chairman be a directly elected role by the membership, not a position appointed by the prime minister. Because I think the membership needs a voice. And because I've spoke to loads of Conservative MPs about this, and and it does make me laugh about when they say, "Well, what's the point in being a member?" Luckily, over the last couple of years, we've got to choose the prime minister. So that's we've had that responsibility and that great opportunity. But other than that, you get to go to party conference. What really is the point? We don't really have that much of a say in policy. In reality, yeah, we've got Conservative Policy Forum and so whatever, but that's not really taken that seriously by the higher ups. But I think if we had a voice within the cabinet, and done that through the party leader, and I think anybody should be able to allow to put themselves forward. So it could be just a normal member, it could be an MP, it could be anybody. I think at least we'd have a voice there, and there's somebody to say, well, wait a minute, the membership wants some people to focus on this bit. Or like want the party to focus on this bit of policy, or how to approach things this way. And I just think it would be a good way of keeping the membership involved, because the greatest asset to the Conservative Party, despite what many people say, is actually its membership when it comes to election time. The reason the Conservatives have one of the best what's known as the ground game, is because it has a very dedicated member. So we're not the biggest political party in the country, but our members actually do go out, we do knock on doors, we do canvass, we do all of that. And I think the more the divide between the what I call the institutions of the party, so like the MPs, CCHQ, and people like that, and the membership, that as more that starts to grow, and it is growing, I think the institutions of the party are going to find themselves a little unstuck when it comes to election time, and there's no one willing to canvas for them. There's no one willing to actually do that work, because they'll be like, well, what's the point? We do this for you, then you turn around and you do something completely different that we don't agree with. I think the Conservative Party, if they're not careful, are heading towards a little bit of an internal civil war about the divide between what the party wants, what the membership want. And I think that tension is growing. And I think the last leadership election, I think, has really shown it, particularly when Rishi Sunak flew through the kind of MPs vote, but has struggled with the membership vote in very early on. I think there's some people in CCHQ need to wake up to this fact before it's too late, if I'm being honest. But sometimes I'm being called out, I'm a little bit too pessimistic, but unfortunately I have this horrible affliction where I end up being right a lot of the time. And on this one, I really don't want to be right.
I think I would definitely agree with voting in like any MP throws a hat in to be party chairman. I think that's a really good idea, and they can decide and be representative. And maybe it happens fairly often. Probably that race, maybe every 2 years. Maybe.
Well, I was thinking you could have it as a maximum 2 terms, and you're in power for 3 years. 3 year terms, something like that. And then because then also you don't end up with somebody who's holding the position for years, who isn't reflective of the current membership. So the position can change as the membership changes. So if we suddenly become a little bit more of a Cameronite membership or whatever, I think we will then have somebody who represents the membership in that majority. But yeah, it's just, I think one thing that annoyed me about the the last two leadership elections is because we've been in power, we've been voting for a prime minister, and they've been dominated by two big issues, obviously Brexit and the cost of living crisis. We've not really talked about the fact that we've elected the leader of the Conservative Party. That's kind of been on the back burner for a bit too long. And I think some of the issues are starting to creep in now. And unless, like I said, unless we start to really get to grips with them and really start to tackle them, and at least have a conversation about them, I think we're in for a little bit of a hurtful time. But like I said, we'll just have to wait and see.
Definitely. Well, let's go on to cabinet. Obviously, Liz has appointed her cabinet, her team in place. There's a couple of people who obviously ran leadership races themselves. Interested to get your take on it. I was talking to someone about the cabinet in general the other day, and I always find it very strange. Maybe it's my finance head creeping in, but how you have people who jump from different roles. So you have someone who, it's a justice secretary, then goes to trade or something. I never really understood that. I always presumed and thought, especially growing up, I always presumed if you're the health secretary, for example, you've got a bit of a health background. If you're in business and energy, so I never. That's always been my bit of issue with the cabinet, in whether it's Tory, Labour, whatever. I never really understood the why you'd bring someone who doesn't have necessary expertise or history of some sort of relevant experience. It just seems a bit strange to me.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I've always found it strange that, when people jump from department to department, like how on earth can you go from being the defense secretary to being the justice secretary or something? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. That I will agree with. But as you kind of because I'm in and around Westminster and the political system a lot, you start to learn that most cabinet appointments are about balancing power. And it's about balancing your rivals. If you're prime minister, about your rivals, but also promoting talent, and also, most importantly, nurturing the next generation through. So I tend not to really look at who's in cabinet, but I look at more ministerial appointments. I look at who are the next people coming through. So the one thing I will always give Ian Duncan-Smith when he was leader was he was the one that really brought Cameron through and Osborne through, because he really took a great role in when he put together his entire government, about making sure the talent was fed through. And we've not really been very good at that over the last few years, with a few exceptions. I think Kemi Badenoch is a great example of developing talent and skills and all the rest of it. But yeah, I have to admit, when you're putting together your main cabinet, you've got to balance your rivals. You've then got to have, the big figures, the big names, some heavy hitters. But you've also got to have those people that carry weight within the party as well. So certain figures will be able to carry MPs with them into difficult votes, and will be able to kind of temper certain rivalries and all the rest of it. It's not an easy thing putting the cabinet together. It's really not. And I think Liz has put together, I think, a very interesting cabinet. There are some interesting names in there that I didn't expect to see. And also,
one's particularly didn't.
I off the top of my head, Kwasi, I have to admit, I get it. They have a long personal relationship and all the rest of it, but I've never been a Kwasi Kwarteng fan. I'm throwing it out there. I think he was a bit of a disappointment in the last government under Boris. I look at really where we are in the economy wise, and I don't think it's just the Chancellor that's to blame. I think the business department has a lot to answer for, and particularly the energy department. Granted, he wasn't there for a long time, but he's been in successive cabinets and successive governments. And I kind of look at his record and I'm like, really? Is that who you want as your number two? Because I'm like, whilst I do agree with him in principle and in ideology, I do kind of look at politicians now as a kind of, well, what have you actually achieved? And I'm really struggling to put my finger on something that Kwasi has actually achieved. And I might be wrong on that. And again, some people may disagree with me, but for me, the Chancellor, what he's got on his plate is a much more of a kind of, you've got to do something, not just talk about something. And I don't really see what Kwasi has been doing over the last couple of years to warrant having what is really the second most powerful job in the cabinet. And yeah, I know a lot of people, I get into trouble for having this opinion. I won't lie on Twitter in particular, but Yeah, but then there are some great appointments. I think James Cleverly as foreign secretary. I think that's a genius appointment. I'm a big fan of James Cleverly. I've known him for a long time. I was actually in Parliament when Liz was putting the cabinet together. She was doing it from our office in Parliament, and James came into an event I was at, and I went over and congratulated him, and he was over the moon, and I think everybody was for him actually. But yeah, there's another couple of, like, Kemi has now got a decent role at DCMS. Anne-Marie Trevelyan, I'm a big fan of Anne-Marie Trevelyan actually. I think it's nice to see her still enrolled. Keeping Ben Wallace in place, I think, was a genius move. But yeah, I think overall, I think the cabinet is in a very strong position. But again, the Conservatives to really win the next election, and that's what this next year and a bit is going to be about, is about doing something. The Conservatives have to do something. And they have to be able to point at something at the next election and say, we did that. We made your life better by doing this. But the cost of living crisis is going to be a big rhetoric game for the left and for the Labour Party in particular. It's going to be basically the rerun of kind of 2015, the austerity kind of Tories don't care about poor people, that kind of stuff. That's where I expect it to be. So for the Tories, I think the way to combat that is to say, like, look, you're all talk. Look what we were able to do. And I think that's what they really have to hammer home. And whether they're going to have enough time to do it, I think it's possible, but they've really got to get things moving. And particularly when it comes to energy bills and things like that, because it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. I mean, look at the rate of inflation at the minute. I mean, it's eye-watering. It's actually eye-watering.
Looking at sort of energy, I found that one interesting. The business energy industry secretary in Jacob Rees-Mogg. I thought he might get a role in cabinet, but I wasn't sure if they would give him that role, especially because well, he is known to be pro fracking, which, to be fair, I'm definitely open for having. But I'm interested. I was surprised to see that he got that role. Were you also surprised, or
I knew he'd get something. He had, because again, it's about keeping the party faithful, happy. It's about keeping that wing of the party happy. I knew he'd get something. I have to admit, I was surprised when he ended up at business, but and where else he would go, I wasn't really sure. But there was rumours that he would end up being chief secretary to the Treasury, which would have been an interesting position for him. But in a way, I don't think it's necessarily a bad position. I think he could do quite well at it. But again, the business department is one thing that's really important in that role is industrial strategy as well. So it's not just about fostering businesses and all the rest of it. It's what are we actually doing with the economy? Where do we want it to go, basically? And we've missed that kind of direction. So I really want Jacob Rees-Mogg and to work with the other people in the Treasury and all the rest of it to really give us a path about where we go. Because obviously we're a financial services. You'll know this as a finance guy better than Ed, better than me. But what else have we got in the UK? What else can we foster? What other regions of industry can we really cement some kind of support structure in? What bits are we failing in? And actually really get to grips with this stuff, because I think it's this lack of direction that has kind of killed a lot of growth, is because, well, we don't really know what we're doing. Like, we're just kind of getting through the day. And I think for too long, that's been the kind of MO of the business department and of the Treasury. So I think that's one thing I'm really looking at Jacob to kind of get a grips on. But no, like, it was, I have to admit, everyone's sat, obviously every Politico in Westminster has been glued to the phone for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so. And I remember seeing Jacob Rees-Mogg and everyone went, really? There was a kind of high-pitched kind of inflection going, really? Because everyone, there were so many rumors that were flying around about what position he was going to get. The most interesting position, and just to mention really quickly, was Chris Heaton-Harris to Northern Ireland. But I was with Ian Paisley MP, again in Parliament. He was at the event I was at. And I tell you what, he was over the moon. Absolutely over the moon with the appointment of Chris Heaton-Harris. And I asked him why, and he's talking about, he's very sympathetic to their arguments and stuff. So obviously his camp are very happy. But it's a really big important position that he's taken, Chris has taken on now, because Northern Ireland is one of these issues that is kind of on it. It's kind of, it needs tackling, it needs dealing with, and it was also one of the reasons that I think I looked as to who was the Justice Secretary and who the Attorney General was going to be, because I think we're going to enter a lot of kind of legal questions now, particularly as I think we're going to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. I think that is very firmly on the table. Liz, when she was running to be leader, she confirmed it to the ERG group in one of their hustings that she wanted to pull out. So yeah, I think we're bordering down a very legal sense of politics right now. So there's certain positions that in cabinet and within the whole of the government are very important, a little bit more so than say who's Home Secretary and people like that. Although Home Sec, I think Suella Braverman, just to give her a bit of a shout out, big fan of Suella. I think I've been a fan of hers for a long time, actually, like quite a long time, because she's been one of those people that's just been around. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she's just always been part of stuff. I think she's a solid media performer, and yeah, I think that was a smart move to make a Home Sec as well. But yeah, like I said, the cabinet has got to do something. The government has got to do something. So I am looking forward to the new budget. I think, depending on when this goes out, the kind of mini budget that we're going to have, and really the support the government is going to give, not just to individual people, but also what it's going to do industry-wise as well. Something that has been criminally under-talked about. Energy heavy industries like steel manufacturing and stuff like that. No one's talked about them. Hospitality in particular. The local landlord of the pub doesn't live that far away from me, and he's a particularly good friend. And he was saying, like, they get hammered, not on wage bills or anything like that. It's on having the lights turned on all day, every day. It's the gas to run the kitchens. He's saying like that. These kind of small things that people don't really think about are just not being discussed within government, or at least within the kind of national conversation. But that needs to change. But there's a lot that needs to change.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, obviously it will be energy industry and business stuff. I'm actually looking forward to it, because just looking at his experience, I know he co-founded or ran a hedge fund. So you'd think, he would have a good idea on things that this country is doing well or not so well in. So he comes across to me as quite a pragmatic person, doesn't really care about too much public opinion.
If Jacob Rees-Mogg cared about public opinion, Jacob Rees-Mogg wouldn't be Jacob Rees-Mogg. I think his great skill is the fact he doesn't really care about public opinion very much. Yeah, you are right. His experience does lend into business. I think it's Somerset Finance or something like that.
Rings a bell.
Yeah, so it's something like that. No, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how well he does there. But yeah,
it's a fascinating cabinet. You've got some names that, to be honest, I think the new deputy prime minister and even Kit Malthouse. There's some names that I don't think a lot of people would have known about publicly until her recent cabinet. But then like you said, you've got a nice balance of the heavy hitters, the big names. If we could give you the one that you're most excited about in terms of cabinet position, and maybe one that you're least excited about?
Yeah, so like I said, the least one I have to admit is probably Kwasi, but okay. I'll give him time. I'll be fair. I've got to let him settle in, and I just want to see what he does. What I'm most excited about is to see how Kemi does. Okay. I think this is a big step up for her. And I know a lot of people probably listening, or a lot of other Conservatives really wanted her to be leader. But for me, my thing was she was too early. She didn't really have a big kind of department under her. And I think she'll do well. But again, she's got to really get to grips with because she's at culture, isn't she? So yeah, I think she's got. Is that where she's ended up?
International trade.
Oh, yeah, of course. Apologies. Of course she has. She's at international trade. So again, it's a big job, international trade. We've got a couple of free trade agreements. We've got getting America back to the table is going to be a big challenge. And apparently from the rumors that were flying around, getting someone to be international trade sec was actually quite difficult.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was really surprised at that because usually it involves a lot of travel. You usually get some decent headlines out of it.
That would be my favorite. If I could pick, if you could do that role without being an MP, that would be like almost like the dream job. It's just
I was really surprised. I was talking to a couple of journalists, and they said the ones they were having trouble with was Leader of the House and International Trade Sec. Like nobody wanted them because I know that they approached Ian Duncan Smith to be Leader of the House, but he turned them squarely down. Because I was like, well, you get to travel the world, flying the flag for Britain. You're always guaranteed headlines the minute you secure one. So it's really easy if you then wanted to be leader the next time around or something, you can point to a solid kind of record of success and stuff like that. I was really surprised at that, but like I said, maybe it's because you've got to deal with America. It's a really tense time in international politics. It might not be as easy as it was in the past, but that's I get it. I was really surprised, but I get politics in Westminster at the minute is kind of still stuck in this milieu, for want of a better word. This kind of don't really know where we are. Everybody's kind of just waiting for something to happen, and it's been stuck like that, I think, really since about January, most of the year, I think. But it's going to be an interesting run up to the end of the year. I think Parliament, from what's happened today, they're cutting down on recesses, so to get things through, because we've had to stop because of the Queen's death and all the rest of it, and they're cutting down the conference recess as well, and I think they want to cut down Christmas recess for a few bits, so like to go further into the year. But politics is going to be back pretty soon, and I think a lot of people will want to get a lot of things moving. It's going to really want to power through, and it needs to as well. It really, really does. There's a lot of things that are hanging in the air that a lot of people are relying on happening, and this is the big challenge for Liz.
What's some of your, if we say from now to end of year predictions? Some of the things that you see potentially happening. I know at the moment, as we're recording this, we're really consumed with the Queen passing away, and King Charles has become the king now. But after this sort of period, what do you see Liz doing, and maybe not doing?
I think it's got to be tackling the cost of living crisis. I think we've got to see, like I said, I think we're getting a mini budget, so all eyes are on that. It's got to be talking about energy bill relief. I think it's got to be a big factor. Support for energy heavy industries is going to be a big one. I expect to see a lot of red tape slashing. There's already been some rumors around cutting the red tape over bankers' bonuses as well. That's going to be a very interesting fight. That happened just today at the time of recording. So that's going to be somewhat of a jumping back to a bit of a throwback to bankers' bonuses and greedy bankers and all the rest of it. A lot of EU red tape slashing, I think, is going to be on the agenda. Northern Ireland has got to be dealt with. I think that's going to dominate quite a lot of the political conversation. But what I don't see happening, I don't see a lot of movement on support for Ukraine. I think that's going to continue. I think kind of reinvigorating the country's interest in Russia-Ukraine, I think is something Liz might really push. Obviously, as former foreign secretary, she was very, very involved. She pushed it quite heavy during the leadership election. So I think that's going to be interesting to see where she goes with that. Anything else? No, like I said, I think most things will be dominated by cost of living. It will be the single biggest issue at the next general election. So this is the thing she's got to get right now. I don't really expect to see much in the way of kind of all the other little things that she promised to look into. I don't really see much movement in saying any of the gender critical stuff, all the woke stuff, for want of a better phrase. I think that might be put on the back burner a little bit. I expect some moves to slashing the size of government. I know she's looked at reducing the things to do with junk food. She's already started to scrap some of those rules. and some of the stuff to do with the Cabinet Office and with the civil service and what they've been getting up to. And I think she wants to get to grips with that because I think that's going to help with the party faithful and help her kind of secure some support going into Christmas. Because let's just say the poll numbers haven't been great for the Conservatives, but they seem to be leveling off now. The Conservatives seem to be holding, from what I've seen over the last few days, about 5 to 6 points behind. This kind of massive gap has just completely disappeared, which anybody who's been around politics for a while knows, of course, that was going to be. We didn't really have a prime minister. We weren't really doing anything for 2 months. So, of course, the Labour Party were able to run ahead with it. That was just common sense, really. Anybody who was getting excited on the left or in the Labour Party about these poll numbers doesn't really know anything about what they were talking about. But yeah, like I said, the government has really just got to do something. Like, we've had a lot of talk for a long time now, and people are going to start demanding action. And unless they do something, I think Keir Starmer can waltz into number 10 in the next general election, whenever that happens to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting sort of times ahead now, and we've got party conference in a few weeks' time, so I'm sure we'll get some things from Liz, from her cabinet, and maybe that'll be a good actually time for us to catch up again on this. We do a post-conference podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I'll be there. I was trying to work out how many years I've been going to conference, and I got above 10 and I stopped counting because I felt old. So I've been going since I was 19 and I'm 31 now. So yeah, I saw an old friend of mine. He calls me a conference veteran, and I was like, "There's people who were going there when Thatcher was prime minister. Please don't call me a veteran." But it's interesting. Conference will be very interesting because it'll be the first time we'll have all been together as a political party post-election, post-Boris. It'll be very interesting to see what a lot of the fringe events are about, because I think that kind of guides a lot of where the Conservative Party is heading and what the conversation is going to be about. Obviously, like I said, a lot of it's going to be about personal finances and stuff like that. But it's obvious, like the other little stuff. I think where the last conference, I thought green issues like the environment and climate change were really front and center in quite a lot of the events. It'd be interesting to see where they fall now in the new regime, as it were. But no, conference will be very interesting this year. I have to admit, I am looking forward to it. I always do. I am really sad I call it Tory Glastonbury, but yeah.
Well, yeah. We have our flagship event on the Tuesday, 6 p.m. So
yes, you're already in my diary.
I'm calling it the pre-drinks. So it's not quite the 8 p.m. slot. So the 6. Yeah, we've got it our one at 6 p.m. But I'm likewise. I'm interested to see what the fringe events are going to be about. I definitely agree with you in terms of last year. A lot of environmental events. I think CEN seemed to have sponsored every single thing.
God, they were everywhere. I actually felt sorry for the people that were working those events. It was like, have you guys slept at all? I know it's conference and people don't sleep a lot anyway, but honestly, they didn't stop, and there were some interesting events. The one thing I will say about conference is Liz's speech. This is a big moment for Liz Truss. I think because obviously with the death of the Queen, she's kind of lost that little bit of kind of honeymoon period a little bit, like a bit where she's really got to like speak to the country, not just about the Queen, and not just, this is the bit where she gets to be political and the vision that she's going to set out. I think I'm looking for a direction. I'm looking for a plan. That's one thing I'd really like to see. Is it's nice to have all these big visions, but I want to know how you're going to get there. And I've big expectations of her speech. I think she will hit them. She's a very good public speaker. She's got a lot better, I have to admit. In that first debate, I thought she was terrible.
Yeah.
I actually I thought she was like Maybot. I thought she was Theresa May 2.0 at one point. But as the hustings kind of took over and she got to be a little bit more conversational style, I think she's got better. But
I would definitely agree with her public speaking getting better. I same as you, didn't think it was particularly strong at the start, but then she did a hosting in where I live in Maidenhead, and
Yeah.
she was great. Like it was done in Ray Film Studios, and they're currently filming Mamma Mia.
Oh,
And yeah, just a fun
that's
fact for
really
you.
weird. That was
But
not the movie I thought you were going to name.
yeah, but she absolutely. So she started the event, and she was talking about Mamma Mia. She was like, I know Mamma Mia is being filmed here, and it's about a middle-aged woman fulfilling her lifelong dream. Maybe someone here can relate, like alluding to herself. And it was so funny. Like I hadn't really seen her do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was so natural. And I was like, oh wow, she's come leaps and bounds in literally like 2-3 weeks.
Oh, yeah. I don't
Um,
know whether she went through some kind of coaching
mm,
or what. That would be interesting to find out actually. But yeah, from the first debate to where she is now, she's the improvement is 100-fold. The one thing I thought she did very well is that speech she gave outside Downing Street, like the day the Queen died. I thought she got what's known as the Prime Minister's voice bang on. So the Prime Minister's voice, for those who don't know, is what we refer to as speaking for the nation. So it's usually you get it after a terrorist attack, or you get it after a period of mourning. When the country is in shock and it needs someone to kind of take the reins, but also show the emotion and to feel what everybody's feeling and all the rest of it. David Cameron was brilliant at it. Theresa May was very good at it. Boris was all right at it, but I think she nailed that first speech brilliantly. I have to admit, imagine becoming prime minister and the Queen dies. I mean, like literally days after you become prime minister. I honestly, my sympathies go out to her for what she's had to deal with. Yeah, I thought she nailed that speech just bang on. I was really impressed with it. I was sat with a couple of colleagues, and one of them is he gives public speaking lessons and stuff, and he was singing praises for it. I have to admit, but yeah, like I said, her speech is really important, and it's the first time she really gets to talk as a political prime minister to the country and to the party. But yeah, we'll wait and see, really. But my expectations are very high.
well, hopefully she can live up to it. It's been great having you back on, Peter. I'm sure we'll speak soon. Hopefully, we'll do a post-conference podcast, maybe one before. But yeah, I'm sure I'll see you at our event, and I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be the drunk one in the corner. And I'm the drunk one, or the guy that's fallen asleep because I'll be exhausted. I've got a packed conference schedule this year already. But yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great to be back.
Awesome. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.